Hey everybody, it's Chris Gorman again with Gorman Residential and Keller Williams Preferred Realty. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my 4 top tactics to win a negotiation every time. So obviously in real estate, we have negotiations throughout the course of a transaction from the very beginning, often until the very end. These are the 4 things that I keep in mind, both within myself and with my clients, to move us to a successful negotiation. The first thing is know what your expected or desired outcomes are, but also know what your acceptable outcomes are. So usually we have an ideal case, an ideal outcome, but we also have an acceptable outcome. And most of the time, a successful negotiation lands somewhere in between point A and point B. Knowing what those points are up front and being very honest with yourself about those things is going to set you up for success. When you determine what those things are, what's your acceptable outcome and what is your ideal outcome, keep in mind all of the different factors and motivators that are going into whatever it is you're doing. For instance, if you're selling a house, don't just look at here's my acceptable price and here's my ideal price. Make sure that you're considering market factors, what's causing you to want to move, what are the costs of not selling. If you stay in the house, what are the costs associated with that? What is the opportunity cost of not selling? In other words, what do you hope to gain by selling? All of that stuff has to go into the pot when you're determining those 2 points. That's number 1. Number 2, know your leverage or lack thereof. Know who holds the cards in the negotiation. Know where you stand. That's going to help you make better decisions and have a better, more fruitful conversation in that negotiation process. And obviously, again, relating back to selling a home, it's your agent's job to kind of tell you where you stand and tell you who holds the cards. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Depends on what side of the table you sit on, whether you're a buyer or seller. Depends on the market conditions we're in. Depends on days on market, price range. It depends on all that stuff. So just knowing that information up front is going to help set the expectations and help guide the conversation in a more productive manner. Speaking of conversation, that leads me to number 3. Keep the conversation going is the 3rd tactic. Usually the negotiation dies when the conversation ends. So as long as we're continuing to talk and work toward a acceptable outcome to both parties, a win-win is what we would like to get to. As long as we keep the conversation going, as long as both parties are still engaged and still working towards that, then we have a live negotiation. But when that ends, when one person backs off, cools down, moves away from the conversation, that's when usually things start to die. So keeping that conversation going, keeping both parties at the table and engaged leads us to a successful negotiation. And number 4 is to be flexible. The human tendency, the human part of us wants to just dig our heels in and say, that's it. I've given an inch. I'm not giving any more. They can, go whatever, pound salt. The problem with that is, in doing that, we've usually lost sight of our acceptable outcome versus our ideal outcome. We've typically lost sight of all of that, and it's more so just about the way you feel, and it's less about the business part of the negotiation. So digging your heels in, never a good thing, unless it is. I mean, sometimes if you hold all the cards, you can afford to do that, but more often than not, that's not the case. And digging your heels in is just going to aggravate the other party, which is going to lead to the conversation ending, which is going to lead to a dead negotiation. So being flexible allows you to give the other party what they think they want, which is everybody just wants to get something. So sometimes just giving a little bit makes the other person feel a lot better about that negotiation, makes them feel like they won or they got something. And feeling that way, or having both parties kind of feel that way, is what drives us through to closing. But if you dug your heels in and the other party begrudgingly agrees to whatever it is that you said, more often than not, that's going to cause a lot more buyer's remorse on behalf of the other party, which could lead to other problems during the course of the transaction or the course of the negotiation if it's an ongoing thing. So being flexible, being open, and keeping in mind what your acceptable outcome is versus your ideal outcome, as long as we're somewhere in that range, and you're able to be flexible and keep that conversation going, usually that leads us to a successful negotiation. So those were my 4 tactics of how to win a negotiation every time. I hope that was helpful and enlightening to you. And certainly if you would like to talk about that or have any questions, I'm always here. You can reach me at 919-670-3005 or email chris@gormanresidential.com. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.